Me too.
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 My name is Cheryl Knapp, and this is my Me Too story. When I was entering my teen years, I started having a strange flashback that I had no idea where it came from. But I remembered, I would remember being in bed taking a nap with my dad, and he began to touch me in a way that was not appropriate. Because I was scared, he stopped. But that incident stuck with me for years, and I didn't realize what an effect that it had on me. I was a very compliant child. I was I really looked up to and respected my parents. And my dad told me at the time, don't tell anybody about this. But I remember as soon as my mother came home that I immediately told her. Even as a small child, I knew this was not right. This was my dad, but this was not something that should have happened. That one little incident kept coming to my mind more and more as I became more aware, I think, of the sexual realm. And after I was married, we were on our way to church one night, and I broke down crying, and my husband thought, what did I do? What did I do? I remember telling my mom, and at that time, my mom and dad had been divorced for many years, and so I figured a good thing to do would be to ask her whether or not that was a real incident. And so I did. I met with her, and sure enough, it had happened. A short time after that, I was watching a program on TV I just happened to turn on, and they were talking about incest. And interestingly, they were talking about the importance of forgiving that person. And I really realized that was something I needed to do. I had done it, felt like I should do it, kind of, it was a good thing to do, but they talked about personally forgiving that person. And I felt pretty strongly convicted that I needed to do that. When you forgive someone, you set a prisoner free, and then you discover that that prisoner is you. And it was a very scary thing to do. It's probably the scariest thing I've ever done. In remembering my father in all those years, I had a real fear of him, and I never really knew why. I thought, well, maybe it's because he had kind of a short temper. He was young, and he had 3 kids pretty quickly, and but I felt really awkward when he would call me babe. I hated that, and I always thought that was kind of strange. I didn't know why, but as this came to light, I realized all of these things were kind of intertwined. I sat down with my dad one day, called him up. He was actually working and drove up in his police car, and I invited him in and said, I need to talk to you about something that happened a long time ago. And he hung his head and he said, I know. And I told him I loved him, and I said, I want to let you know that I forgive you. In that moment, that fear that I had of my dad was broken. And I saw him as a wounded little child who was the son of an alcoholic father who was always pushed aside. And not that what he did was right, but I saw him in a different light. Well, the sad thing was, I actually talked with a counselor at my church when I had watched this program, and she advised me, she concurred and said that, it was a good idea, but she said also when I talked to my dad that I should mention that if there was anyone else involved, that he needed to make that right. I was pretty naive and assumed that it hadn't happened with me again, that it was probably done. But a few years later, it came to light that he had been molesting another person, and they shared it with a school counselor, and it got exposed and had to get reported. and he ended up losing his job that he loved. I was contacted by the police or whoever was doing the case, and I had to actually share my story a bit. And then a while later, my brother and I actually testified on my dad's behalf because they were concerned that a policeman who was also a pedophile being put in prison was going to be in a very vulnerable position himself. And so it was kind of a very strange place to be, because I testified against my father in one way, but on the other hand, I also testified for him. When the whole thing came to light, I remember feeling like everybody was focusing on, and obviously it was a horrendous thing, and what he had done was being front and center in everybody's mind, and I felt like I needed to write him a letter and let him know the things that I appreciated about him, and the other things were very obvious. But I sat down and did that because, for my own sake again, I felt like if you always are focusing on the negative in someone, it has an effect on you too. And there's also the other side of the truth, which is that person has a lot of good characteristics and good things. They have done horrendous acts, but they also have good in them as well. It's not all that uncommon to have an offender be someone that's either close to you, a family member, or a close friend of the family, and it's not really all that unusual. So it's not just date rape or kids experimenting with playing doctor or any of those things, but this is out there, and it's good. I felt it was good to make people aware of it.